Can you hear me? I'm going to stand right here. This is a fortress of Machaerus. This is where John the Baptist was arrested, beheaded. They arrested him from up by not too far from where we ate lunch. Remember, we looked down and we saw the Jordan Valley. Down there is where John the Baptist was baptizing. We're going to be there tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. And John the Baptist was preaching against Herod, who had taken his brother's wife, Herodias. And he brought him here. You got to imagine that this was a huge fortress on top of that built. They only have a few pillars up there now so you can see up there. Now, Janet can tell you what it looks like up there, because when we were filming the story of Jesus, we parked our van right here and we had to carry all that heavy video camera equipment. Went right down those stairs and we walked all the way up there in the summertime, like Elias was saying, and it was hot. And we filmed up there. So if you want to see the top of it, watch our Jesus, the Word Became Flesh documentary. But imagine at the time that it was partly under the surface there, and then he'd have his harems and his baths, cold baths and warm baths. He'd have lots of food stored up in the fortress of Masada. They had 19 years worth of food for 1,000 men. So up here you can imagine, it's not there now, but that would have a fortress on top of that, but half of it was underground too. And out here he was safe. Nobody who's going to get him. And if he had his soldiers up there, he was very well protected, looking out over, probably on a clear day. Fortress of Masada is just across the sea there, and they could be maybe even in touch with smoke signals or something back and forth. But it says, I'm just going to read a passage of the scripture because I can't summarize it as well as Mark wrote it. And King Herod heard of it, and Jesus' name became well known, and people were saying, but John the Baptist has risen from the dead. This is after Herod had killed him, because of the miraculous powers are at work in him. So Herod thought when he killed John the Baptist that Jesus was John the Baptist come back from the dead. But others were saying, no, he's Elijah. And others were saying he's a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he kept saying, John, whom I have beheaded, is risen. Herod himself had sent up to the Jordan River where we were and where we're going to be the day after tomorrow. Herod had sent and had John arrested and bound in prison right here because of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip. For it's not lawful, for John kept saying to Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Herodias had a grudge against John because of that. She must have had a pretty cushy position with Herod, this guy. Her husband was kind of weak. This guy was strong. And she wanted John put to death, but could not do so, for Herod was afraid of John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and Herod kept him safe. And when he heard him, he was perplexed. He'd always enjoy listening to John preach and teach. At Machaerus, right here now, this is the place. It says at a strategic day. It doesn't say where. We learned that from Josephus, who was a first century writer. Josephus was a Jewish historian writing for the Romans, and he wrote a magnificent history of the time of Christ. It's fantastic. It fills in a lot of the gaps and connects a lot of the dots. He said, the Bible doesn't tell us where John the Baptist was beheaded. Josephus does. So I'm including that in here. At Machaerus, on a strategic day when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet to his lords and military commanders and leading men of Galilee, and when Salome, now the Bible doesn't say the name Salome, we also learn her name from Josephus. The daughter of Herodias herself came in and danced. She pleased Herod and all of his dinner guests, and Herod swore to her, whatever you ask me, I'll give to you up to half my kingdom. Beware, guys, never drink too much. That guy had too much to drink that night. Salome asked her mother, what shall I ask for? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. Luke gives a little interesting one that she asked for it on a silver platter. She came in a hurry and said to the king, I want you to give me this head of John the Baptist on a silver platter. And although the king was very sorry because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he was unwilling to refuse her. Immediately the king sent an executioner right in there and commanded him to bring John's head back. And when he did, John was beheaded in the prison and brought his head back on a silver platter. That's in the Gospel of Mark. I'm sorry, not Luke. And came to Salome, and the girl took the head to her mother. Can you imagine? That's pretty grisly. That's pretty macabre, I'll tell you what. They were pretty different at the time. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. And you will see that tomb in Israel, in Sebastian, in Samaria. You'll see the tomb where John the Baptist laid for hundreds of years, and where Elisha, the prophet, laid next to him in a tomb in Sebastian. We'll take you there. You'll go into that tomb. So Josephus said, this is an interesting thing from Josephus. Now, some of the Jews thought that Herod's army had lost the battle. And some of the Jews and others thought that he had lost the battle because he had killed John the Baptist, that was God's vengeance on Herod for killing his prophet, because Herod slew him and he was a good man. And he goes on here, but here's where it says, Herod, who feared lest the great influence of John had over the people, might put it into his power and inclination to raise a rebellion. That's what they were always afraid of. Even Jesus was killed for political reasons, not religious reasons. He was killed because the king and Pontius Pilate and Herod and others thought that he was going to start a political revolt. And even one of Jesus's disciples was called Judas the Zealot, Simon the Zealot. Zealot was a group of Jews who were trying to form military power to fight against Rome and kick them out of Israel. And even Jesus, can you imagine? He's got Simon the Zealot, who is one of the warrior guys wanting to start a military expedition against Herod. And you've got an IRS agent, Matthew, the tax collector. And you've got all of these different guys right in his... Can you imagine the political discussions they had while they were walking along? So he came in to raise an army of rebellion. They seemed ready to do anything he would advise. He thought it best by putting him to death to prevent any mischief he might cause. And he was sent as a prisoner out of Herod's suspicious temper to Machaerus. That's where we learn that from Josephus, that he was sent here to Machaerus, a fortress I before mentioned, and there he was put to death. So there you've got the historical background for this site. Now, John, before he was put to death, there was a period of time when he was arrested, and when he was put to death, we don't know how long that was. It couldn't have been too long, because Jesus' ministry was only 3 years. Jesus sent his disciples from here all the way up to Galilee and said, go ask him if he's the one. Was he doubting? He may have been. He's a human being. He may have been doubting. He had seen the dove come down where we're going to have Mass in 2 days and light on Jesus, and the Holy Spirit had told him, when you see that, you'll know he's the one. He saw and heard of Jesus' miracles. I think that John the Baptist sent his disciples to go ask, are you the one? Because he wanted them to become Jesus' disciples. Remember, it says, John said, I must decrease and he must increase. Do you know who the 2 disciples were who were John the Baptist's disciples before they became disciples of Jesus? Andrew. Very good. Andrew and another one, and because it's in the Gospel of John, he never really mentions himself. So it was probably Andrew and John, who were already, it says, disciples of John the Baptist, who then left John the Baptist and transferred their allegiance to Jesus because they found out he's the one. So you have disciples who are of John, and at one time too, they said, Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples to pray. So I think that John here had his disciples. He knew his end was coming. What are you going to do with this band of loyal followers? I want them to go to him who's the real Messiah. Go up and ask him if he's the one. Jesus said, the dead are raised. He quotes from Isaiah about the Messiah. The dead are raised, the lame walk, the blind see. Let John know what you've seen, meaning I am him. And I think that's how those disciples then were transferred to Jesus. Another thing I would want to mention of is, why was John the Baptist a martyr? Was it for preaching Jesus and baptizing people in the Jordan River? No, it was because he was confronting the government at the time over the issue of marriage. John the Baptist was martyred because he confronted the king, the government, about illicit marriage. Why do you think we're going to be persecuted in the United States? Because we as Christians are going to oppose our government who has said that 2 men can get married and call it a marriage. 2 women can get married. When's it going to be 3 men or 2 women and 1 man, or a man and his dog?
Right.
And don't think I'm being silly when I say that, because there's already people wanting to marry their dogs. And they say if you redefine marriage as something other than a gift and a sacrament from God between a man and a woman for a monogamous relationship, once you change that definition to mean a relationship, then why does it have to be 2 men and 2 women? Why can't it be 3 or 4? And already the polygamists are trying to make marriage a group, and some are wanting to marry their animals. And this is what's going to happen. And why are we going to be persecuted? Look to John the Baptist as your patron saint in America from now on, because we're going to be persecuted for the same reason, because we oppose a government that says that marriage is anything you want. And when we stand up for traditional Christian marriage, we're going to be the bigots, we're going to be the intolerant ones, and we're going to be persecuted. So get ready for it. I'm ready for it. I'm not backing down for anybody. And I'm teaching my kids the same. I've already told my kids, I want you to raise my grandchildren to be martyrs. I want them to be prepared to give their life for Jesus Christ and the church. And Maria Faustina says, but Grandpa, why do you want us all to die? I said, Maria Faustina, I don't want you all to die, but I want you to know there's something worth dying for. Don't ever deny Jesus Christ and his church, or what he's taught us, even if you have to die for it. So that's what we learned here at this mountain. So this is another one of those crazy Steve Ray sites, because we had to take a long diversion. We could have saved an hour and a half or so to get to Petra. But this is one of the 5 pilgrimage sites John Paul II established. We did the other one this morning where we had Mass. Mount Nebo was number 3 that we visited. Right. And that is one of the pilgrimage sites with Moses. So and now you're at the 4th one, where that was established because of such an important man. Jesus said there was no man born of woman that's greater than John the Baptist. He is, if you think about it, John the Baptist is the last of the Old Testament prophets. And he's the first of the New Testament prophets. There are 2 people that stand right in the middle between the old and the new like a bridge. John the Baptist and Mary. Those 2, both of them are Old Testament Christians. Old Testament Jews, I should say. But both of them are now also in the New Testament. They're the bridge, John the Baptist and Mary. John proclaiming the message, Jesus bringing the message to us. So that's why I wanted you to see this site. We don't get to go up there, but at least you get to see it. And next time you hear the readings of the Gospels of John, you will not forget this place.
So just to, what was on the top of there?
Up on the top is I'm going to find the picture. I have a picture somewhere of what historians have rendered, an illustration of what they think it looked like. A very colorful fortress with a big tower, big tower for looking out over the land. And he probably had brothels and harems and every luxury a king could want. And he probably got carried on one of those, I don't know what they call them, but there were the slaves carrying the poles, and he's sitting up in there, you know, fat and happy up there, probably with his girlfriends, Herodias. But I'm sure he didn't walk up there. He got carried up there.
So John was brought up there and then beheaded.
He was in prison. He was beheaded in the prison up there.
Yeah,
Yep. All right. Any questions?
Yes.
What's on top now?
What's that? That's just, they just put up 2 of the pillars just so you could see them.
Oh, okay.
Fortress. Where are we in relation to Masada?
Masada would be over on the other side of the Dead Sea.
Masada on the opposite
Oh,
side?
no, it'd be down that way. Right about down there. Masada would be right down in that area.
It'll be on